Welcome back to Archaeology After Dark, everyone. I am, of course, your caffeinated host, Daniel Rhodes. My guest today is Mia Bakotic. Mia, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. Hi. My name's Mia Bakotic. Obviously, as you just said. I am a anthropology student at Auburn University studying focus on archaeology. Um, and yeah, I mean that's really it about me. I don't know. I don't know what else to say.
So,
Um,
so for those of you who missed our awesome meeting in Montgomery a couple weeks ago, Mia gave a really great presentation about how we can combat pseudo archaeology. That's, stuff that's not really proven science but it runs rampant through the field and it keeps, the real information from getting out there.
So that was a really fun time to speak there. That was my first time speaking in front of anybody. So it was very stressful, but I think it sparked a lot of really good conversations. And I was really happy with how it overall turned out. So that was good. Yeah.
So, Mia, as a student studying archaeology, how does pseudo archaeology affect you as a student in like the classroom setting?
Yeah. Well, I mean, on the like academic side of things in the classroom setting, we talk a bit about it in certain classes, like just kind of saying, hey, this is a thing that exists, it's a problem. Um, and kind of just talking about some of its negative effects, but you don't really see the full scale of it through like PowerPoints and notes and stuff. You don't see the full extent of its reach really until you get more in the online space. Um, you know, it's discussing it in class stuff is great, but it doesn't really give you the full picture. Um, I know like once different online platforms like Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, whatever, all of them do the same thing. But once they figure out that you're interested in like archaeological content or historical content, they will just push you pseudo-archaeological stuff nonstop, constantly, all the time. And it's kind of annoying, but that's what most people see, and it's kind of a shame because people who are genuinely interested in archaeology and history, a lot of them in my generation or my age, do have those interests, and then they go looking for content like that, and all they find is pseudo archaeological stuff.
So
Um,
to clarify what we're talking about, you'll go on something like Reddit or Instagram and you'll see people posting pictures of artifacts and they want like a simple identification. What we're talking about is the people who slap on that tinfoil hat and they're like, so this indigenous mound has a giant's femur in the center of it. I know I use that metaphor a lot, but that's probably one of the wildest ones I've heard. Or this was carved by a space laser 10 million years ago. I'm like, no, that's
mhm.
none of
Yeah,
those things are
or
true.
like the pyramids, or like the pyramids or power plants and stuff like that. So yeah, that's kind of there's a very wide variety of stuff like that. And it's, anything from giants, aliens, Atlantis, like it involves a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's like I said, it's unfortunate because usually people who are genuinely interested find that first, before they find any of actual archaeological research. Um, and you see that a lot. I'm sure others have had similar experiences, especially like on a college campus. Like I meet somebody for the first time, and they're like, "Oh, what's your major?" And I'm like, "Oh, anthropology." And usually at first they're like, "Oh, why?" And then I'm like, "Oh, I want to do archaeology and stuff." And then they're like, "Oh, that's super cool." And a lot of times they're very interested in it, but they don't really know what it is. Um, and I have people a lot of times bring up like have you seen like Ancient Apocalypse, which is Graham Hancock's show on Netflix? Or they'll bring up aliens or some other thing, giants, some form of one of those theories. And it's kind of, it's very hard to not get super frustrated about it because it is very frustrating, but at the same time, you don't want to take it out on that person because they are innocently curious about stuff most of the time. That's just what they've been exposed to. So I usually, when I'm in interactions like that, try to steer the conversation more towards, well, that's not really the case because of X, Y, and Z, but this is what we actually do, and like this is stuff I'm interested in, and just kind of talk more about reality a little bit, but still in a way that has a sort of mystery around it. Like, look, we know this, we know that, but there is so much that we still don't know. Doesn't mean it's aliens. I think that sort of still having that kind of, a healthy way of getting some of that mystery mystique in is important because it's what keeps people interested in our research and wanting to follow it. So I think that's usually how I try to handle those situations. And usually I walk away from those feeling like, the person I was talking to has a better understanding of what we do and why it's important. And that makes me feel good because I feel like I made some small minuscule difference. But it changes that perspective for that one person and then it'll stem out from there. So I think that's really important. But yeah, that's as a student, I would say those are the main two things that I would say.
Yeah, and it's, always an interesting interaction you have with somebody when, you're trying to guide them to the right information. And when they, assuming they do reach out to you again, they're like, oh, so this is what you were talking about, not, Atlantis, dinosaurs filled with Atlantis or something.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Atlantis filled with dinosaurs. You can't cram Atlantis into dinosaurs. That's not, I don't know.
I'm sure you can.
I mean, sure.
Don't you know that the Atlanteans coexisted with the dinosaurs and they built every megalithic structure on the planet? Don't you know that? You should know that.
Yeah,
God.
the Great Wall of China was built by underwater fish people and dinosaurs.
Yep, to keep the dragons out. That's what it was.
Yeah,
It
that
didn't really work very well because they can fly, but they
yeah,
tried.
yeah. I mean, that's what it's all about. Studying archaeology is dragons.
I wish sometimes.
Yeah, my degrees are in dragons and ancient architecture. Oh, I would never get taken seriously if I told people that.
I
Oh,
would take you 100% seriously, honestly. I like dragons.
I
I'd
mean,
be I'd be
I
down.
could straight face and be like, so how do you feel about dragons and the gland that's in their throat that causes fire?
I would eat that up. I'd be like, yeah, yeah. What are the different breeds of dragons? Let's break it down.
There's the green ones, the black ones, the gold ones, the white one. I know these. I have a degree in dragons.
Obviously, obviously. Hmm. Hmm.
Mm.
Hmm.
But that's not what we came to talk about. As much fun as talking about dragons actually is. So what's
I
the
see. I was misinformed. I thought this entire thing was about dragons.
Oh, now I have to do an episode on dragons at some point now because I want to.
I'll join you for that one too.
So what's the solution to combating pseudo archaeology? It's not like we can actually go and just like take down the posts for this kind of stuff on like Reddit or Instagram and stuff like that.
As nice as that would be. No. Yeah, it's a big question. And I think the answer is really a big ask for a lot of people. But coming from just like a student perspective, I think a lot of students are very hesitant to counter pseudo-archaeological claims, especially in the online space, because they're really afraid of being wrong. And there's like this mentality of I'm just a student, someone who knows more than me should handle this. Um, But at this point, there's no one's, or at least very few people are really handling it effectively. And there's not really any time to waste waiting for somebody else to take a stand on it. Students, I think often have the advantage of knowing the online space very well. So we have a bit of an advantage there where we can get out there and put our opinions out there and our voices out there more effectively than some people in some of the older generations. Um, and that's really what we need because pseudoarchaeology has grown its roots in very deep on the internet.
Oh, yeah.
That's kind of its home base. And, if we really want to make an effect to take it down or something, it has to be on their home front, essentially online. It's the easiest way to reach the most amount of people. So, through videos talking about things or, even just like it can be just like words, posts, AI, voice stuff. You don't have to put your voice and face out there, but it's important that what you have to say is heard and it's heard in a charismatic way of some form. Because that's the main thing with the pseudo archaeologists. They're very fun to listen to and they're very charismatic people. So people want to listen to them. They've got cool stories and they've got cool personalities. So people want to listen. And in order to combat that, we have to kind of do the same. Um, and I'm sure like I know we've spoken some. I am planning or I have launched my own YouTube channel and I also have an Instagram account for that as well. The bones of it are up. I'm planning on posting on that probably for the first time within the next 2 weeks or so. Um, but I'm sure there will be times during that project where I'm going to be wrong, especially if I continuously do it for a long time. And someone will correct me and I'll take that with grace because, even professionals can be wrong sometimes. Um, what's really the most important is doing the research and fact checking as best as possible and then putting that research out there in a way that makes people want to listen. Um, and I think kind of pulling a quoting myself from my talk at the meeting, but I think it's very important, give them the facts and the dates and the research and the data, the work, but don't leave out the narrative elements that make people want to listen. Because if you just have, you plain research and facts and dates and stuff, it's very dry.
Yeah.
Um, and you might interest people directly in our field, but you're not going to interest a lot of people outside of it. And that's really what we need to focus on a little bit more. People are interested in history when they can feel a humanized connection to it. So it's kind of anticlimactic to share just the labels and numbers. Um, I think it's important to share like, the very powerful, very beautiful, but very real stories that we do have. And you know, it's kind of it's like we study people who lived hundreds, if not thousands of years ago. So it's easy for there to be a kind of disconnect with that. Um, but I think, the way to kind of heal of the wounds that pseudoarchaeology has dealt to the public's view of history, the only way to fix that and heal that is by acknowledging that the people of the past don't really need anything to be added in to fictionalize or romanticize our lives because they're already very true, romantic, emotional, raw stories that exist in reality. And it's not fair to those people who lived before us to cast those aside in favor of something that's fake. Um, so I would say, getting out there, putting your face out there in some form, putting your voice out there in some way, and sharing, the things that you're interested in a way that, your passion for it comes through and it makes people want to listen.
Yeah, and that's, you bring up a really great point is because, when you see an article online, it's like a really catching headline, like human history rewritten. And I'm just like, you're not rewriting history, you're just adding to it. Like nothing in the timeline has changed. You're just adding like color to a black and white picture.
Yeah.
But then, you read the article and it's a great article, don't get me wrong, whatever it is, usually. But then you're like, okay, this isn't It's just like a really eye-catching title. It's not any real substance to it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, I know when I talked about this at the conference or the meeting, and also just talking about it with some other people in general, the like one kind of critique or criticism that I've gotten about what I've said um is basically like people feel like I'm saying we should over romanticize and exceptionalize things, that we should just focus on like the shiny things. Um, but that's not really what I'm advocating for. What I'm saying is it's really important to bring the human aspect back into archaeology because I feel like we've lost that a little bit. I think, in the name of studying the normal everyday lives of people, I've seen some people in the field kind of get caught in this trap of almost like dehumanizing the past a bit. And it seems like, they're so afraid of being accused of over embellishing that they leave out things inadvertently or choose to focus on things that, or focus on things, how am I trying to say? Not focus on things in their research, but focus on what things that they put out there are not necessarily things that people are interested in outside of our field. Um, and I think in a field that relies so heavily on public interest, it's really it's important that we kind of feed into what the public is actually interested in just a little bit to some degree. And all I'm really arguing is that we can present our research in a way that's enticing to the general audience's ear, which is what we need to kind of work towards doing. It's not necessarily the content itself, it's the way it's presented. Um, and I think thinking about this, one example that comes to mind, and I apologize, this is like I'm recalling this from like 3 years ago when I heard it, but it's the bones of it have stuck with me. A professor of mine was talking about some work that they did in uh, years prior in class. And she was talking about like the expansion of Cahokia, and she was saying that when they were expanding out, some officials of some sort from Cahokia went to surrounding settlements and basically said that they had to build their houses in a certain like newer way that was more stable. And there's evidence that people switched to building their houses the new way when they were asked to. But there's also evidence that some settlements that people basically like half-assed it and faked it. Um, so they like basically on the outside it looked like they were built in the new way, but on the inside they were actually still building it with their old construction methods. And this made me laugh because I was like, this lack of compliance is so human. Um, and it's something that people can look at and have a moment of amusement over because of course people acted like that at that time because people act like that now, and honestly, people haven't changed that much. Um, and it's a situation where it's like it's very normal everyday life topics that are being discussed, but the content of that story is what makes it so interesting and so funny because people can relate to it. It's something that people can look at and see and be like, yeah, that's humanity right there. That makes total sense.
And I think that's something that like shatters people's like perception of archaeology. It's not like plundering glorious tombs or rediscovering where Alexander the Great is buried or something. It's the I know a lot of people would probably say it's the mundane, like day-to-day stuff, like, oh, this is somebody's favorite bowl or favorite spoon. Love that
Yeah.
spoon.
Uh,
Favorite spoon. Best spoon
yeah, no,
ever.
the greatest spoon in the world.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a spork,
Yeah,
you
it
know?
could be. Yeah.
Not special.
It could be the
It
first
could be.
sport
It
for
could
all we
be.
know.
Um, but yeah, so I mean, like I said, with everything I've talked about, it's not like I'm saying we need to focus on like I said, the shiny things. We can still focus on the mundane, like like you said, or like everyday life things. But, you know, it's important to remember that these are people. And I feel like, as archaeologists, we can't just be researchers. We have to also be storytellers, especially if we're wanting to combat pseudoarchaeology in an effective way. And I think it's important to remind people you don't have to feed into these false narratives to tell a story. I mean, we have thousands of years of human history to pull from um, all over the planet. So there's plenty of content there. And humans, we're dynamic beings. We really aren't logical creatures most of the time, and there's not a real reason not to share that side of history with people. It doesn't have to be told like you're reading from a research paper. It can be told like a story because that's what it is. It's the story of the past, the good, the bad, the ugly. It's a story
The
of
ugly
humanity and
parts are the best parts of history.
exactly. Exactly. And by I think, presenting like the quote mundane things in a dry way, it just does a disservice to the people who came before us because, we would never describe our own individual lives and histories in a dry way. So why would we tell the stories of others in a dry way? Um, and to get people to listen and actually be interested in the work and research we do, we have to kind of drop that dryness and show that these are, people, these are humans, these are people just like us. And, that kind of connection is what brings a little bit of interest in. And I think that's important to have.
Yeah, that's absolutely right because, we're still people. Like people, they have changed, but we are still people. Like the same wants, same needs. Like the spoon thing I mentioned. Spoon's been around for a long time. Everyone has had the spoon.
Yeah.
You just got to make that
Yeah.
spoon the most exciting spoon ever.
It's the greatest spoon in the world.
Yeah, it's the greatest spoon ever. People write
Unless you don't want
papers
to do
about this
dishes.
spoon. People write papers about this
Yeah,
spoon.
no, this is talking about spoon stuff make me think I'm like, ooh, this is probably really bad. Being a college student, I don't like doing dishes, so I just use like plastic spoons and forks and stuff, and I'm like, that's a problem. My very special plastic spoons that I have.
No, those are the
So,
fancy guest. That's the fancy guest cutlery
mhm. Oh, it is. Oh, it
for
is.
visiting
Yep.
dignitaries, of course.
Of course, of course. Because I have many visiting dignitaries, obviously, in
Yeah,
Auburn, Alabama. So many of them come by just to see me. Why wouldn't they?
I mean, yeah, why wouldn't they? I mean, Alabama's, happening spot.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's where the
Exactly.
royalty of the world vacations.
Naturally. Naturally. Because where else would you go? Where else would you go?
I mean, but nobody has what Alabama has.
No, no one does. But I'm not sure if that's a good thing.
I probably shouldn't say, but yeah, this is fine. This is fine. So
This is fine.
yeah, this is fine. This is fine. It's all about the little treats. Again,
The
little treats.
little treats, the little treats. Gotta have the little treats. Very
So
important.
I think part of the problem of pseudo archaeology, not to go any further down the rabbit hole than we already have, is just at the way the speed information becomes available because of digital technology like the internet. Like Jimmy in his basement with his tinfoil hat comes up with a brand new theory, puts it on Reddit, and it trends like overnight. And just then, like 2,000 people have seen it, and then it just explodes even more.
Yeah. No, and that's very true. It's very fast, and I think it's only just now in kind of, the past few years that, people in the field are starting to realize how much it's grown and how much of an influence it has over a lot of people. Because it's very fast and it caught a lot of people off guard, I think. But, you know, I I don't think it is a very steep hill to climb up, but I don't think it's an impossible hill to climb up. You know, I think, like I said before, in order to, effectively stop it, not necessarily stop it, but combat it in some way, is to kind of get online and do the same thing. Um, and I think what I really want people who are watching this to step away with is, this is a battle, and that's not really an exaggeration. Pseudo-archaeology is something that we need to have a collective voice against. It can't just be, one or two people. It's got to be, multiple people in the field as a whole. Um, and, I think the power of pseudo-archaeologists' stories and narratives and voices is very strong, especially on the online space, just because the roots are so deep there. But we have the truth. And if we are able to share it and our passion for the past in like an effective, good way, then I do think it's a problem that can be overcome. And it's not going to be something that's overnight. It's definitely not. And it's going to take a lot of people that are willing to step up and kind of put themselves out there in a way that they're maybe not necessarily the most comfortable with. I mean, I'm in that boat. Um, but if we don't kind of get people to step up and do something, then, the histories and the lives that came before us, the validity of them is going to disintegrate along with our profession. And that's not really something that I'm willing to stand for. A pillar of our work is, preserving the past, but that doesn't just come with curating and preserving artifacts and stuff. That also, comes from preserving the public's view of the past and keeping it from being distorted. Because if it is distorted, the very essence of what we study and hold so dear is definitely at risk. And I think that's kind of where we're at now, where it's kind of we're at the edge of the cliff and we could jump off and just steamroll down the hill and it's going to go all to crap, or we can do something to stop it.
Yeah, and what we're trying to do is trying to keep people from devaluing the past. We want people to see it, respect it, maybe even love it. If you decide to love it, great. We want you to.
Yeah. And I think, like I said, there are a lot of people that do have genuine interest in the past. Like I mean, I meet so many people on campus and pretty much nobody here studies archaeology. So when I say that, everybody is very interested because people are interested in things they don't hear about often. And a lot of them are like, "Oh, I thought that was so cool when I was a kid. I wanted to be an archaeologist or whatever." Um, and so like that interest is there. It just needs to have some fuel. And unfortunately, the only fuel it's getting right now is these over fantastical, mystical claims that aren't really needed to fuel that fire. We can fuel that fire with things that are true and real and still very profound.
Or we can just start actual fires. That's good too. So, Mia, we're coming to the end of the episode. You're a student in archaeology. What advice would you give to people who are coming into archaeology as like a student or prospective student?
Yeah, okay. Well, I will say, I started college as a pre-vet major. I was a pre-vet major for almost 2 years, like a year and a half. I never thought about really doing archaeology before. My entire life, I was like, I'm gonna be a vet. I'm gonna be a vet. That's what I'm gonna do. And then I got here and I started doing stuff with veterinary work, and I was like, this isn't something I want to do for the rest of my life. I'm not really happy. Um, and I had an interest in history. I had an interest in archaeology. I would read stuff, research papers and stuff for fun because I'm a nerd. Um, but I never really thought about doing that as a profession. And it wasn't until I realized I'm genuinely not happy with what I'm doing right now. I need to find something that does make me happy, that I looked into like archaeology as a career. And it was a lot of debating and turmoiling over whether I should take that leap because, I went from wanting to be a vet, which everybody knows a vet. There's vets everywhere. If I ever had any questions, I could just go ask one of them, to jumping into archaeology, which I had no exposure to at all. Besides like, stuff that I would read online, but I'd never met an archaeologist. I didn't have one in my life or anything like that. And I just really, I decided I was like, you know what? I'm not happy right now. I want to do something to change it. And I took the leap. And, my professors have been extremely helpful with, guiding me along that afterwards. But, I think for prospective students of archaeology, if it's something you're really interested in and you do find happiness and fulfillment in learning about it and it's something you want to try, take the leap. Just do it. What have you got to lose? Just do it. Um, because I'm very happy with where I'm at right now, a lot more so than I was before. So I'm very grateful that I made that decision because I think I'd be miserable if I was still pre-vet. Um, so yeah, that's really the main thing because I think it's very daunting to make that decision, especially if you have there's the other factor of parents or family members kind of being like, oh, why do you want to do that? Um, that's weird. But I think, over time, my interest in it and my passion for it has grown so much that like my parents have seen that and they are supportive of me now, even though they were concerned at first. Um, but it's something, jump in, go off the deep end, go for it, and put all the work you can into it to make it what you want, because that's really important. I mean, if you jump in, then you just sit there and do absolutely nothing, you're not gonna get far. Jump in and then actually work for what you want to do. And
Yeah,
that's what I would say.
absolutely. Like that's one thing it's both like kind of a headache, but I also love it about archaeology. It is a constant work. Like even you're doing the work, but you're also having to constantly work at it to making sure like everything you do is either up to standard, up to date, making sure you're not becoming one of the tinfoil hat people.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a lot to keep track of, for sure. And like I said, I've really only been involved with this for a year and a half, honestly. Um, but in that year and a half, I've gotten hands-on with a lot of things, and every opportunity that's come by me, I've taken. And it has been a lot of work and a lot of long nights and long days working in a cow pasture on field school, but it was really fun and it was
It's a
very
fun cow
rewarding.
pasture.
It was a fun cow pasture. It was. We had the train go by really loudly. That was right near us too. It was awesome. It's like 100 degrees. It's great. This is probably not a very good like
We'll work on our
advertisement,
sales pitch for
but
archaeology in another episode.
but it was very fulfilling. It was hard work, but at the end of it, I felt like I was doing something important. And that's what meant the most to me. So that's kind of, why I continuously keep putting myself out there and, kind of throwing faith into the wind to see what'll happen because at the end of it, I want to feel like I'm making a difference and doing something important. And I feel like archaeology is a great profession to be in to do that if you have that motivation.
Yeah, if you don't have motivation at all, archaeology probably isn't great for you.
Probably not. Probably not. I would say probably not. Um, yeah, that's kind of an important factor. But yeah.
Well, Mia, it's been really great having you on the show. Thanks for joining me. I've really
Yeah.
enjoyed it.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. Take care, everybody, and tune in for more.